Howdy folks, welcome to lesson 16 of my Network Plus course. In this lesson we'll be explaining the topic of Ethernet standards. Alright, let's go learn. Now, first of all, folks, for those of you that don't know this yet, Ethernet is actually a family of wired computer networking technologies. So, what we're saying here is it's not necessarily limited to a normal network cable. Some of you might know this normal network cable as a LAN cable, so that's the one I'm referring to. Basically, the cable you would go and plug into your normal RJ45 port on your laptop or your desktop PC. That is a normal LAN cable. So Ethernet, guys, is not just limited to that kind of cable. So folks, when we say Ethernet standards, it actually pretty much includes most, if not all, networking types of cable. It, for example, includes the old coaxial cable, which we don't really use anymore. It includes the good old-fashioned CAT cables that you might be familiar with, the ones that uses the RJ45 connectors, and then it also, of course, includes fiber optic cable. So with that in mind, we can safely say that Ethernet is the most widely and commonly used network technology. Pretty much anywhere you have a network that is connected via some sort of cable, guess what? You have Ethernet there. It's mind-boggling once you realize how much and in how many places we actually use and make use of Ethernet without even realizing it. It's literally almost everywhere, including in our own homes. Scary stuff, eh? So like we said earlier, folks, Ethernet consists of different cables. Since Ethernet consists of different cables, we can then also safely say that these cables come with different connectors. They are not just limited to the common RJ45 connector some of you guys might be so familiar with. Each cable type also comes with its own benefits and of course its own drawbacks. Each cable has a different speed, some are slow, some are fast. Each cable type also has a maximum distance it can go before the signal on that cable needs a bit of a boost, as you can imagine. Basically a repeater of some kind, which will be required. So you're going to either have to go and plug that cable into some sort of repeater or a switch of some kind. The signal obviously gets weaker and weaker after a certain distance. Alrighty folks, now that we know Ethernet is not a specific cable type, I think we can jump deeper into this and cover some of the various kinds of Ethernet cable we actually get. Please take note that Ethernet cables is extensively covered in the official CompTIA Network Plus exam, so you really need to know this stuff if you intend on taking the exam, guys. So if anyone that plans on taking the official N Plus exam, you need to know your cable types, you need to know the maximum distance of each cable, what we use them for, if they're immune to EMI, or how immune they are to EMI, what kind of connectors they use. You need to know all of that if you plan on writing the exam. So just a note there, guys. Now folks, before we start this first cable type, if you haven't done it already, please do me a favor and hit that like button. It really does help, as you can imagine. You know you wanna. And then of course, if you'd like to know when lesson 17 in this course comes out, or one of my other courses, because I plan on doing Security Plus as well, then I don't know, maybe consider subscribing, otherwise you might miss that. Okay then, let's start with this first Ethernet standard. First up, folks, we've got 10 base-T. Yes, each cable's got a code you guys gotta know as well. Now this, folks, is a very old Ethernet standard, in case you didn't know. It has many other names too, besides this 10 base-T. It's also commonly known, believe it or not, as cat-free cable. Cat is short for category. So every time you guys hear me say cat, I mean category. So when I say cat-free, I mean category-free cable. Believe it or not, this is basically your good old-fashioned telephone cable. The telephone lines you plug your phone into, that, guys, is cat-free cable. Some folks also call these POTS lines, P-O-T-S. It stands for plain old telephone system. Now yes folks, 10 base-T could also be a normal computer cable. Usually you folks might know this more commonly as a telephone cable, but back in the 90s or up to the 90s, we could actually get a different kind of cat-free cable which we also used to use on our computers. Back then, this cable could only transmit at a maximum speed of 10 megabits per second. Can you believe it? It's hard to imagine that we used to transmit data at that slow speed. And if you think about it, back then we didn't really need more than that. Most people didn't have a computer. If they had a computer, it was probably at the office, and they were most certainly not on a network, and definitely not on the internet back then. Nowadays, everybody's got multiple devices, and we definitely need to transmit it way more than just 10 megabits per second. So times have certainly changed. So cat-free, folks, comes in two kinds of cables. One is a telephone cable, the one that we still get till this day, but they're quite rare. The other one was a computer cable, which is kind of extinct. The last time they used that was in the 90s. Now, folks, these cat-free cables, the telephone cables, they come with two pairs of wires. I'm saying the word generally because that's what a book will tell you, but realistically, in some cases, you'll actually find that some of these cables have got 2, 3, or even 4 wires. So it depends on the phone setup there, but the book will probably tell you it only comes with 2 pairs of wires. But sometimes there's only 2 wires, there's only 3 wires, or there's 4 wires. It's not always what the book will tell you. If you're wondering what the maximum distance is these cables good to go, the maximum distance these cables can go, which is the same for a lot of network cables, guys, is 100 meters. Now, that's the metric system, so you're going to have to go type that into Google to go and convert it to, well, your system if you're not using the metric system. I think that's about 300 and something feet, 320, 326 or somewhere around there. So that is how far they can go in sense of maximum distance. That's once again what a manual will tell you, but realistically they don't go that far. Realistically, you'll be lucky if you can get about 80 or 90 meters. There's a difference between book knowledge and real life. As we mentioned earlier, the maximum speed of these cables is of course 10 megabits per second, which was really fast at that point in time. Nowadays, that's just, wow, we don't even talk about it. Now, the cable connectors that these cables used to use, or that they still use, is RJ11. You can also possibly find these cables with an RJ24. Not something I personally really see. I only find them with RJ11s. But you can possibly find them with an RJ24 as well. I suppose it depends on the country you're in and the region you're in. So realistically, you're probably only going to find RJ11s being used. The RJ11s, in case you're not sure, are those little tiny transparent connectors that plug into the back or the bottom of your landline phone, guys. They look very much the same as the connectors you plug into your laptop or your desktop. It's nearly identical. It's just a little bit smaller. It's got only 4 copper connectors, where the one you plug into your laptop or desktop, that would be an RJ45, and it's got 8 copper connectors. Now, folks, before we proceed to the next Ethernet standard, there's just something I would like to point out to you guys, which is very important. I did briefly mention that. What I'm about to explain to you next, and what I have explained just a couple of moments ago, once again, that is what you need to know for the exam, and that's what you'll find in a manual if you were to go get yourself a manual. But like I said earlier, there's a difference between theory knowledge and real life. So you guys need to learn this for the exam if you want to pass the exam. But once you pass the exam, please be careful of some of this information because it's not entirely true. It's not entirely accurate. For example, a cable cannot go 100 meters. If you look at Cat5 and Cat3 and all those cables, the manuals will tell you they can go 100 meters. I assure you, they will not go that far in real life. Anyway, guys, every time I see something, a topic like that, I'll point it out to you guys. I'll tell you guys what you need to know for the exam, and then I'll tell you guys realistically in real life what you can expect from that. Alright then, on that bombshell, I think we can move on to the next Ethernet standard here. Next up, we've got 100 base TX. This one, folks, is 10 times faster than the previous 10 base T that we spoke of. It has a speed of 100 megabits per second. It makes use of Cat5 cable, which stands for category 5, obviously. The 100 base TX is also known as fast Ethernet because of how much faster it is compared to, for example, the 10 base T cable we spoke of. Funny thing is, this is probably one of the slowest connections you'll get today, but obviously this wasn't always the case when they made this cable back in the day. So back then when they released category 5, it was tremendously faster than Cat 5, which is why they called it fast Ethernet at the time. So the name still stays. I mean, it's still called fast Ethernet, even though it's probably one of the slowest cables you get at this point in time. Now, the maximum distance for this cable, as you guys can probably guess, is 100 meters, like most of these standards. Now, folks, like I said before, the 100 meters is only mentioned because that's what the manuals will tell you, and that's what you need to know for the exam. But in real life, we know it's probably going to be obviously much shorter than that realistically. Another Ethernet standard we get, which is on our list here, guys, is 1000 base T. Now, with this standard, we drastically improved the 100 base TX in multiple aspects, guys. Now, the speed of this standard is, for instance, up to 1000 megabits per second, or should I say 1 gigabit per second. Now, instead of normal Cat5 cable, folks, with this standard, we make use of Cat5e cable. Now, in case anyone is wondering where you would find Cat5 cable, the last time I saw that kind of cable was probably in 2008. So chances are you're not going to find that lying around anywhere, unless you've got it in an old box in your garage somewhere. I really don't see you finding this cable lying around anywhere. Nowadays, we only make use of Cat5e cable, and of course, much better than that. The 1000 base TX standard makes use of all 4 pairs of wires inside the cable, so that would be all 8 wires, guys. The maximum distance it can go is the same as the previous one, which is obviously up to 100 meters. Now, guys, obviously, please remember this maximum distance for the exam. It is very important. We know it's not accurate, but that is what they will ask you in the exam. Now, it's worth noting that if a network is or was still using 100 megabit setup, and they decide to use these cables, which go up to 1 gigabit per second, they will also have to upgrade their equipment, like the network switches, for example. Just because you've got faster cable, guys, does not mean your network will be faster. Sometimes your switches and stuff might still be stuck on 100 megabits. You've got old hardware, so you will probably have to upgrade multiple things in your network. Now, at the moment, as things stand, this 1000 base T standard is in fact the cable that we use the most at the moment in most companies. As time goes by, this is obviously going to change very soon, so maybe in a couple of months or in a year or two from now, companies are going to start switching over to the next one and then the next one. So, at the moment, as things stand, this is the most common kind of cable you'll find in companies. Every 5 or 10 years, companies will go and improve, and they'll move over to something faster, of course, because that's how things work. They normally then change their cabling as well as the equipment that goes along with it. So, like I said earlier, you can't just go and change the cable to a faster cable and then assume your network's going to be faster. You need to change everything that goes along with it, including things like your switches. Now, here, folks, we have the 10G base T standard. This standard is once again 10 times faster than the previous standard, which was the 1000 base T. So this standard can go up to speeds of 10 gigabits per second. Wowza. Not a lot of companies are using this standard yet, but obviously that's going to be changing very quickly as we go forward. It would not surprise me at all if some companies have started switching over to this already. Absolutely would not surprise me. This standard runs at a much higher frequency than the other gigabit standards. It runs at 500 megahertz instead of the 125 megahertz some of the others run at, which translates into a heck of a lot more speed. Now, sometimes these cables, guys, visually they'll look the same, they will feel the same, but the one cable will be so much faster than the other one. And people wonder, okay, but how is that possible if they look the same, they feel the same, everything about them is the same, and yet the one is faster than the other? That, folks, is usually because of the frequency. A higher frequency translates into more speed. Now, in case you folks didn't know, 10G base T standard makes use of Cat6 and Cat6A cable instead of the previous Cat5 or Cat5e, which we mentioned earlier. The maximum distance this 10G base standard can go is not necessarily 100 meters like of the other standards we mentioned. Instead, it depends on the cable you use. If you use Cat6 cable, which is unshielded, in other words UTP, you can go up to 55 meters. But if you use Cat6 cable, which is in fact shielded, in other words STP, then you can usually get up to 100 meters. So it's going to depend on what kind of cable you're using here. It's not the only deciding factor, but that's one of the big deciding factors. You will, however, notice that nobody actually really uses Cat6. Instead, people just use Cat6A, and with Cat6A, you can get up to 100 meters in distance, regardless of whether you're using unshielded or shielded. So that's just generally what people will go and use. Now, with both unshielded and shielded, you will get the usual 100 meters if you're using the Cat 6A with this standard. Now guys, next up, we've got the 40G base T standard. Now guys, it's probably worth mentioning at this point in time, this standard is more like a fairy tale since you'll hardly ever see this. It's like a unicorn. So it's probably going to become more and more commonly used as we go forward in time. But at this point in time, it's very unlikely you guys are going to see this kind of cable. So this 40G base T standard only works with Cat 8 cable. Yep, folks, I'm serious. You get Cat 8 cable. It does exist. The maximum distance you can expect to get out of this bad boy of a standard is only about 30 meters, they say. So that would mean it's probably even less than that. So they say up to 30 meters. So you can imagine, I mean, earlier when I said 100 meters for the other cables, we know realistically it's way less than 100 meters. So if this one, if they say up to 30 meters, we know it's probably less than 30 meters. So that's not very far, guys. So obviously we can imagine this is only going to be used in a place like a data center where stuff might probably be close to one another. Realistically, they're probably going to be using fiber. Now, speaking of fiber, here we have an Ethernet standard that is a fiber wire. Yeah, that is also Ethernet, guys. Fiber wire actually also falls under the umbrella of Ethernet. So the 100 base FX standard is one of the slowest ones, but generally with fiber standards, you can extend on the speeds and distances we've been mentioning up until now. In most cases, with fiber standards, the speed will generally be higher and the distance will be a lot further and greater. With 100 base FX standard being one of the slowest out of the lot, it uses multi-mode fiber. You get two kinds. You get single mode and you get multi-mode. So multi-mode is normally the slower kind, and it's normally used indoors over shorter distances. Single mode is the faster kind of cable, which we normally use over long distances outside. Anyway, folks, this cable also commonly uses lasers to send light through the cable. By the way, that reminds me, you should never look directly down the tip of these fiber connectors, guys. If you do that, you can really damage your eyes and you might even go blind. So please, whatever you do, don't look directly down a fiber cable's connector because that laser or that light can really harm your eyes, guys. Please don't do that. If you really need to look at it to see if it's on, look at it from an angle. Or better yet, rather hold it near the palm of your hand or something instead of just checking, down the little connector if there's a light. So if you hold it near your palm of your hand or something solid, you'll probably see the light reflecting on it. Then you'll know, okay, cool, there's a light there. Now the speed of this standard you might have figured out already, folks, because it's in the name. The speed is 100 megabits per second, so it's not very fast for fiber, but like we said earlier, it is one of the slowest kinds of fiber you get. Now, as for the maximum distance of this specific standard, it will depend on if you're using half duplex or full duplex. If you're using half duplex, you can expect a distance of up to 400 meters. That's the metric system. If you're using full duplex, you can expect a distance of up to 2 kilometers. That's a heck of a lot more than some of the other cables we've mentioned earlier, eh? Here we have another standard, which is fiber, and it's very much the same as the previous one, folks. Name-wise, it's almost identical. This one is SX, and the previous one was FX at the back. The SX version is basically a cheaper version, the previous version we just discussed. It goes without saying that if it's cheaper, there's bound to be some things that's probably going to be worse about this version compared to the previous version. Speed-wise, guys, the SX version is surprisingly the same as the previous version, coming in at a speed of 100 megabits per second, so it's surprising. Now, as for the light going through the cable itself, instead of a laser, it uses LED optics, which is a lot cheaper, but it also has its drawbacks, like you would expect. Now, unfortunately, one main drawback about using LED optics instead of laser is that the maximum distance is now unfortunately reduced to 300 meters instead of the one we had earlier. Alright, folks, and then here we've got 1000 base SX. Looking at the name once again, you can probably guess what the speed of this bad boy would be. Yes, that would be 1 gigabit per second. Wow, that's a lot. Now, folks, this is the second last one we're going to be discussing in this video. The other one is also going to be 1000 base something, except that one, the letters are going to be slightly different at the back, which does make a difference. Now, this SX version uses something called shortwave laser. That's going to become important in just a moment, and it uses multi-mode fiber. Now, earlier in the video, depending if you guys paid attention, you would have heard me say that you get multi-mode fiber and you get single-mode fiber. Multi-mode fiber is usually what we use over short distances. It's normally slower, and for the most part, it's used indoors. Single mode fiber usually is a lot faster, used over much greater distances, and it's usually used outdoors. Now, unfortunately, this SX version of this fiber cable, folks, can only go up to a maximum of 550 meters. So you can expect to get between 220 to about 550 meters. And that's mainly due to it using multi-mode fiber. Now, as for the shortwave, I'm probably going to discuss that more on the next cable. You get shortwave and you get long wave. Shortwave means you're going to get much shorter distances, folks. And long wave means you're going to get much longer distances. In a nutshell, that's basically what it comes down to. Now, moving on to the last cable here, the 1000 base LX. Once again, due to the name, we can kind of figure out what the speed for this bad boy would be. It's once again 1 gigabit per second. Like I mentioned the previous cable type, this one uses long wave laser. The previous one uses short wave. So obviously the previous one's going to be a little bit slower. It's going to be using multi-mode. This one uses long wave laser, which means it's going to be much further. As for the distance that this last one can go, it's going to be approximately between 550 meters and up to 2 kilometers. I've actually heard some of these cables go up to 5 kilometers in some cases. How far exactly you go is going to depend on whether you're using short wave, long wave, or using multi-mode fiber, single mode fiber. So if you're using multi-mode, then you can probably expect on the lower end, you're going to probably expect to get about 550 meters approximately. If you're going to be using single mode fiber, then you can probably expect to get about 2 kilometers. Heck, maybe if you're lucky, you can even get up to 5 kilometers of this cable. It all depends on circumstances and various variables. Either way, folks, that is the last one on this list. I really hope you guys have learned something today. Hopefully you guys have learned something about Ethernet standards. If you have learned something new, please drop a comment down below and let me know what you did not know. What did you learn? It's always cool to see what you guys learned in the video. If you guys haven't done it already, please give the video a like, especially if you learned something, and maybe also consider subscribing so that you don't miss out on lesson 17 or maybe my Security Plus course or one of my other courses. And then lastly, guys, just a quick shout out. I normally do this at the end of all videos. Thank you to all the supporters and the sponsors of this channel, guys. This channel cannot function without you guys, so thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. So here's a list of all the Patreon supporters. Well, at least the ones that said they want the name in the video. I normally ask them first, and a lot of the guys actually prefer to stay anonymous, believe it or not. Here is a list of all the PayPal supporters. Thank you very much to those guys as well. And then the very last bit in this video, guys, if you haven't seen it, the channel does have a Discord server. It's called Free IT Training. It's a free IT community of people like yourself that's studying for N+, as well as many other courses. So feel free to go and check that out as well. You'll find lots of additional study material on that group as well. Alright, folks, I will see you in lesson 17 of my Network Plus course.